Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine a scenario where a machine can predict your medical future with, honestly, astonishing accuracy. But when you ask it exactly why it made that prediction, complete silence. No explanation whatsoever. This is the high-stakes mystery of artificial intelligence in modern healthcare. Today, in this explainer, we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of research called X-FEMR, a token-level explainable approach for electronic health records foundation models using transformer-based models. Yeah, I know it's a super dense title, but at its core, it's about a team of researchers who finally decided it was time to force medical AI to explain itself.
Which brings us to a fundamental question. Would you trust a medical AI if it literally couldn't explain its diagnosis to you? You see, this isn't just some academic hypothetical. We are talking about literal life or death. When a doctor is standing right at a patient's bedside trying to decide whether or not to rush them to the intensive care unit, they can't just blindly follow a machine saying yes or no. They need the why. If they just blindly trust a prediction and the machine is relying on, say, irrelevant data or some hidden statistical error, well, the consequences are catastrophic. This lack of transparency is what experts call the black box problem. And honestly, it's been the single biggest hurdle keeping incredibly powerful AI out of real-world hospitals.
So here is our roadmap for cracking this case today. We'll start with the black box problem, then look into decoding patient trajectories, building the surrogate detective, hunting down token-level clues, testing in the ICU, and finally, trusting AI with lives. Section 1. The black box problem. Let's look at exactly what we're dealing with when it comes to AI's transparency issue. So you've definitely heard of large language models, right? The AI behind all those chatbots. Well, in the healthcare world, they use something called FEMRs. That stands for Foundation Models for Electronic Health Records. Basically, these models are trained on massive, longitudinal sequences of clinical events. They learn the incredibly complex temporal patterns of a patient's entire medical history to predict outcomes, things like disease risk or whether a patient will end up back in the hospital. And they are powerful. They consistently blow older task-specific systems out of the water. But here's the catch. Their internal decision-making processes are frustratingly opaque. They operate on such high-dimensional, complex representations that we have virtually zero idea how they actually reason through a patient's history. We know for sure they work, but we really don't know how they work.
Section 2. Decoding patient trajectories. We really need to understand the kind of massive data these models process.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer, staggering volume of data we are talking about. Look at these statistics from the study's dataset. We're looking at the number of clinical events in a single patient's trajectory when predicting things like a long hospital stay or an ICU transfer. The average patient, they have around 2,400 individual clinical events recorded. But look at the maximum. A single patient trajectory can have up to 7,888 events. Just imagine a doctor trying to read a 7,000-word essay made entirely of irregular medical codes before making a split-second decision. It's just an enormous sequence of data points stretching out over time. And what exactly is an event anyway? Well, AI doesn't read a medical chart the way a human doctor does. It reads tokens. Every single recorded heartbeat, every lab result, every diagnosis gets compressed into a dense digital package. A clinical event token contains 4 crucial pieces of information: a standardized medical code, a numeric value, like an actual blood pressure reading, an optional text field for descriptions, and, critically, a timestamp. The AI takes up to 7,888 of these dense 4-part tokens, maps out the entire chronological sequence, and then predicts if a patient is going to crash. Honestly, it's no wonder the model is so complex that we can't easily read its mind. Section 3. Building the surrogate detective. Let's introduce the solution to our mystery. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how the researchers tackled the problem. At the top of the pipeline, we have the CLMBR T-base. That is our black box foundation model. It takes in those massive input sequences and spits out a prediction. Since we can't just cut open the black box and peek inside, the researchers built what they call a surrogate model. Think of it as a transparent translator. That's the task-aware event-level transformer you see right in the center. They fed the surrogate the exact same inputs and the exact same outputs as the black box. They essentially told it, hey, watch this black box carefully and learn to mimic its behavior perfectly. By doing this, they created an interpretable proxy. Because they built the surrogate themselves, they can look inside it to see exactly how all that data is being weighted. Now, when they were training this surrogate detective to mimic the black box, they tried 2 different approaches. The first is hard label supervision. This basically means training the surrogate to simply mimic the final binary decision of the AI, like a strict yes, transfer to ICU, or no, don't transfer. The second approach is soft label supervision, which tries to mimic the raw probability outputs, capturing all those nuanced confidence levels of the AI. Interestingly enough, the hard label approach actually performed much better. By focusing on the final decision boundary of the AI, rather than getting bogged down in all its internal uncertainty, the surrogate was able to capture the temporal dynamics of the health records way more effectively.
Section 4. Token level clues. Time to shift to the investigation phase and look at the exact clues the AI used.
To extract these clues from the surrogate model, the researchers used a technique called SHAP. Think of SHAP like a highly advanced mathematical magnifying glass. It meticulously combs through a patient's medical record and assigns a concrete importance value to every single clinical event. It doesn't just give you a vague, hey, blood pressure is important overall. No, it says, token number 452, which was a systolic blood pressure reading taken exactly 12 hours ago, that was the primary reason the AI predicted this patient needs the ICU. This gives us token-level explainability. It is incredibly rare, and it's infinitely more useful for a clinician who's trying to verify an AI's logic for a specific patient. We literally finally have a magnifying glass to read the clues.
But hold on, how do we actually know if the clues the AI is zeroing in on are the right clues? Well, the researchers compiled a list of human-verified, clinically validated features. We're talking about established clinical predictors for ICU transfers, things that human doctors actively look for every single day based on national early warning scores, things like respiratory rate, temperature, systolic blood pressure, and heart rate. Keep these very specific features in mind, because we are about to compare hundreds of years of human medical knowledge directly against the internal logic of a machine learning algorithm.
Section 5. Testing in the ICU. Let's see if our surrogate detective actually cracked the case. First things first, we have to verify that the surrogate isn't just some cheap imitation of the real thing. And wow, the data here is absolutely remarkable. The transparent surrogate model didn't just match the black box, it actually slightly outperformed it in key predictive metrics. For predicting hospital length of stay, the surrogate achieved an AUPRC, which is a key metric for accuracy, of 0.4434, compared to the black box's 0.4173. It also significantly outperformed the foundation model in its F1 score, hitting 0.4889 compared to 0.3717. What does this mean? It proves that we absolutely do not have to sacrifice performance to get transparency. A transparent model can reliably capture those complex dynamics just as well as, if not better than, an unexplainable one. So the crucial point is, what was the AI actually looking at when making these highly accurate predictions? When the researchers analyzed the top 5 most frequent tokens driving the model's predictions, the results were pretty stunning. Number 1, heart rate. Number 2, systolic blood pressure. Number 3, body temperature. Number 4, diastolic blood pressure. And number 5, respiratory rate. The AI, left entirely to its own devices to sort through thousands upon thousands of complex data points, independently decided to rely on the exact same vital signs that human doctors have validated over centuries of practice. The machine's logic aligned perfectly with human logic. No way, right?
Section 6, Trusting AI with Lives. Let's look at how this transparency translates into actual clinical trust. To really quantify this trust, the researchers developed a brand new metric, the Clinical Validated Events Ratio. For predicting length of stay, that ratio was 0.3093. Basically, this means that nearly 31% of the AI's most heavily weighted tokens perfectly matched established, human-validated medical knowledge. Now, I know what you're thinking. 31% might not sound like 100%. But remember, this model is parsing through massive, massive sequences of noisy, complex data where a ton of the tokens are just routine administrative codes or mundane notes. Finding a concentration of over 30% on critical validated features, that is a massive validation. It shows the AI is making decisions for the right medical reasons, rather than just relying on arbitrary statistical noise. The authors actually conclude their study with a really powerful statement. They note that token-level explanations align well with clinical knowledge, offering a practical framework for interpretable and trustworthy clinical AI. You see, this research isn't just about creating a neat visualization tool for data scientists. It is about fundamentally changing the relationship between the physician and the algorithm. By using a surrogate transformer and SHAP analysis, we can finally take a dangerous, opaque black box and turn it into a verified, transparent, and genuinely collaborative partner for clinicians.
Let's step back and see how this builds a completely new paradigm for patient care. We've seen today that we absolutely have the tools to demand explanations from the machines that will increasingly guide our health. As these foundation models continue to unlock the dense secrets hidden inside millions of medical records, we really have to ask ourselves, Is the future of healthcare going to be artificially dictated by opaque algorithms, or can we force it to be a transparent, collaborative extension of human wisdom? It seems, thanks to research like X-FEMR, transparency is finally winning. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you walk away with a deeper understanding of how we can build real trust in the tools of tomorrow.